Hi, welcome back to Reset. Today we are talking about a topic that is quite interesting, and I've asked my guests to dive deep into research and numbers so that you and I can find out everything we need to know. We're going to be talking about the true cost of having kids, not just how much does daycare cost and how much does giving birth cost. Like, we are diving really deep, and to go into this subject in detail, I would love to welcome back my guest, Jayde, to the studio.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks for having me.
For anyone that's meeting Jayde for the first time, she is a financial advisor. She has been a friend of Reset from the start, and we've got a number of episodes together that I can link in the show notes if anyone wants to go back and listen to those. But Jayde, thank you for coming in for this important conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's quite a heavy topic, I think, in areas.
Yeah, and like a perk for me having a podcast means anything that I'm curious about, I can just invite very intelligent people to come and sit on the couch with me, do the research and like tell me all the answers. So I think this is, an important conversation that is not really discussed enough because it's, as you would have found out prepping for this episode, hard to find the true costs.
Absolutely. How long is a piece of string?
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. On average, how much do people in Australia spend on having a baby?
I think the short answer is we're not really sure. It's very different for everybody. And whether you're doing it you can do it cheap and it can be really expensive as well. So if you think about what we need before we even have kids, like before we're even trying to have children, it's from doctor's appointments, if you're doing genetic testing, if you're doing any external help with your fertility, just prepping like through nutrition and whether naturopathy or anything like that, that can all be very expensive to start with. And then when we start thinking about actually having a baby and preparing a nursery and all the things that we need to get to actually house a baby, like prams, car seats, cots, that's very easy to walk into Baby Bunting and spend $5,000 or $10,000 just like that. But it's also very easy to get things secondhand on marketplace, especially in the city. I think we're very lucky, those of us that are in the city, that there are things readily available very cheap. I personally did a little bit of both, didn't go too wild. But then there's also things like changes in lifestyle with purchasing things like cars and bigger houses and making more space. As I was reflecting on these questions, I thought, I got a bigger house. And I got a bigger car. So we went from
Guilty,
one baby in a townhouse with a Ford Focus, and then we had before we had our second, a 4-bedroom home and an SUV, basically, which is probably the normal trajectory of what happens when you have kids. And if I think about all my friends, most of them did the same thing. So it's just one of those things that kind of naturally occurs. I guess it was a little hard to put a rear-facing car seat in a Ford Focus with a husband who's 6 foot and myself who isn't short either. Not much space, and there's not much boot space for prams and overnight bags and all sorts of stuff. So your lifestyle probably is just going to get a little bit more expensive as well from that perspective. Actually giving birth, I guess. So if you go down the public system, it is obviously significantly cheaper than going private. Obviously, there's reasons why people do each of those, and that's great that in Australia we have those choices. If we're going public, you're probably only about $1,000 out of pocket. If you're high risk, need special care, again, Medicare's pretty good at covering most of that. Obviously, there's always the outliers, but public health system's pretty reliable when it comes to having a baby. Private is obviously very different because we need to make sure, first of all, that we have our private health insurance with pregnancy attached prior to having a baby, at least 12 months. So that means 3 months before getting pregnant. If you're going full term, please don't leave it that late, just in case bub comes early. Making sure that probably when we start talking about family planning that we get that in place and we know what that looks like.
I can feel Rose kicking while we're talking.
She's hearing us.
Yeah, she's like,
sorry, Mum.
Are you talking about me?
So most out of pocket, you're probably not going to be out of pocket any less than at least $3,000. I've heard lots of people saying over $10,000. So I think that you could probably get a good fee schedule though from your doctors and whatnot ahead of time to make the decisions about which way you want to go. And then something that's becoming more common is home birthing. So this is where you're dealing with like a private midwife and you're having a baby at home. I've been quoted some costs from some lovely home birthing midwives.
Curious. Tell us.
So ranging, so out in the country, you're looking at maybe $5,500, which is probably on the lighter end, but also right up to $8,000 is still quite common as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, all going well. We can have bub at home, not getting transferred. Obviously, if you're being transferred, you're probably going to a public hospital anyway, and at that point, there's probably no real further cost. But yeah, it's not a cheap exercise to do private or home birthing.
Not at all. And this topic's obviously very fresh for us. And Alex and I talked about it on our joint podcast earlier. But it's really tricky at the start when you first fall pregnant to think that you need certain things, like medical stuff aside, like that's important. But, the bigger house, the fancy nursery that's like just as beautiful as the Pinterest board and stuff. But babies need to be safe, loved, fed. And so it was, we went through that same transition of, oh my gosh, we're having a baby. Do we need a bigger house? Do we need this, this, and this? And we've really tried to be intentional at like stripping that back and thinking, okay, no, she doesn't need the Pinterest nursery that she's not going to remember, and we will be okay in our apartment, at least for the foreseeable future and things like that. So I guess expectations versus reality, and then just like stepping away from it, because I know our social media feeds can just become so full of beautiful, elaborate things, and it makes us think like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be a good parent if I don't have X, Y, Z, and it's not true.
That's right. And I mean, it's funny that you say that, because having your first baby is so exciting.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to buy into like the aesthetic of having a beautiful nursery and whatnot, which is great. Like if you can do it yourself too, like DIY is half the fun. But I think about like our first, I had his nursery ready probably 3 or 4 months before he was born.
Cute.
And my second was in his bassinet in our bedroom.
Yeah.
Until he got too big for his bassinet. And then he was in a cot in the spare room because I was like, oh, we needed to have, our 4th bedroom added so he could have his own room, but we weren't in a hurry. So I think it's very much a first, second born thing, that you're very over prepared first time around, and second time you just make it work.
Yeah. And it's interesting how many things for babies, and I'm obviously still learning this, but they might only last a month or 6 months or something. And then so passing it on to friends and things like that to just make life a little bit easier is a nice kind thing to do. Or looking on Marketplace, like you said, or secondhand. Like you don't need super shiny brand new for everything.
Yeah, and I think you also don't know what your child is going to like.
Yeah.
So my firstborn was really fussy. The one thing I spent my money on was my pram. I was like, that's like my car of the baby world. Like I'm having a good pram.
Yeah.
Probably about $2,000 back in like 2019. But he hated it.
Oh no.
I sold it because he would not stay in it. So for the first 5 months of his life, I baby wore him. So I got a baby wrap instead of having the pram, and eventually got a new pram and whatnot. But yeah, things like that. And then he also hated being in those swinging things. I don't know what your baby rocker things, because he had reflux. So you lay him down and he'd be uncomfortable. So again, we spent $250. Actually, I think my in-laws gifted it to us, but we ended up selling it and getting something else for him because he just hated it. So you don't know what your baby's going to like and be like until they're here. So I think holding off on those sort of purchases is probably ideal until baby's here, and you can test them out a little bit and see what they like. Maybe buy a cheap one on Marketplace, and if they love it, then you can maybe go and buy a better one or something like that.
Such good advice. Such good advice. What happens if we add proactive egg freezing or IVF on top of this?
Yeah, so this one opens a bit of a can of worms in terms of cost. So egg freezing we'll probably start with because it seems to be a little bit more controlled in terms of the costing. So from all the research we've done, and shout out to the April Babies Facebook group that I'm a part of from 2020, who shared some live stories about themselves. Egg freezing was really ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, dependent on whether it was considered medically necessary or not. So whether we're just choosing because we don't have a partner, or because we want to have kids later but not yet, versus no, you actually, your eggs are declining in, I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but you don't have enough, or they're not the right quality and it's declining as we age, or you've got endometriosis or some other medical issues, then you may actually qualify for some higher subsidies from Medicare to help cover that.
Interesting.
So that's just for that. But then you've obviously got storage fees to keep them, depending on how long you keep them, which range into the hundreds of dollars per year to hold them. IVF was quite a hard one to get my head around because there's so many different variations of IVF which have different costs. Some people have said they actually didn't really pay much out of pocket at all because, again, they had medical conditions that they qualified them for additional support. Some people actually use their super to fund all of their IVF, which is released on compassionate grounds. Ooh. We did have a bit of a joke that they had to get a report done, which was $800 that they had to pay out of pocket to prove they needed access to their super to pay for their IVF. But yeah, so I've seen some that say $25,000 around, some say $7,000 around. But again, it's going to depend on the type of IVF that you need and how many times.
Okay. These numbers are really adding up.
They do, and I've heard them go into, $100,000 to have one child.
Yeah.
This is not really anything you can financially prepare for. This is just something that it's good to know the information if you need to go down this path, but that there are avenues like superannuation, which obviously being a financial advisor, I don't advocate to go here as your first option. But if you really want to have a child and your finances are not, going to support that and you need to go down the IVF path, then there is options available to you to be able to get that, the gift of having a child.
Yeah, okay. So these are the costs of getting the baby safely into the world.
Yeah.
Then I Googled in research for this that the average age of moving out of home now is around 24 years old.
Yeah, you surprised me with that.
Yeah, and it's on the rise. So that means baby Rose is going to be living with us potentially until the year 2050. Yeah. I've never said the word 2050, like the year 2050 before. And who knows, I might be like, please stay forever. Yeah. But what is the average cost of getting a child to age 24?
And I mean, again, this is going to depend on all your life choices, right? We're doing private school, we're doing public school. But CanStar Blue did do a report in 2024 about the cost of raising a child. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on your, cost of daycare, which is dependent on your income and whatnot. But on average, one child costs $1,000 a month to have, which most people probably say, sorry, my daycare is more than that.
Yeah.
So let's talk maybe older kids. Again, though, you've got private costs, but this is just on average. 2 kids, $1,200 a month, 3 kids, $1,300, and 4 kids, $1,400 a month. I think the concerning thing that I found with this was that figure practically doubled since 2018.
Okay.
So we're talking $736 a month for 2 kids in 2018 versus $1,214 a month today.
What do you think has caused that?
Inflation, cost of living, that thing that happened in 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if I guess you add on top the pressure to have a bigger home, have a bigger car, all those sorts of things, maybe that's not included in these costs, but that's your own lifestyle expenses going up. And I know a lot of people are really making conscious decisions these days of A, do I have children at all for a number of reasons, and B, if I have kids, is it one? And cost is a huge factor.
It's quoted as the number one reason for our declining fertility.
Yeah.
So it is. It's really unfortunate that that's what it's become. Yeah. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later as well. I've got some good stats around it. But that means that not even allowing for inflation, Rose is going to cost you about $350,000 on average. So if you choose to do things that cost more than average, you're looking at more than that.
An expensive life decision, but priceless, right?
Absolutely.
Priceless.
And you make it work, right? So many people have kids. We make it work. Yeah. It is what it is. My husband and I do joke about our life we would have had we have not had children. But, can't put a price on kids, can you?
Yeah, interesting. And I don't think there's anything wrong with choosing a life with no kids. I think it can be filled with so much love and fulfillment as well. But
a lot of women are choosing not to have children, and I think that that's really, if that's what they want to do, great, that we have a life these days where lots of women are able to make that choice. A few of my girlfriends have made that choice and they have wonderfully fulfilling lives in other ways.
Yeah. And a bit of extra cash. What are some of the hidden or unexpected costs?
Yes.
So we've got the obvious ones, but what might be surprising for people?
Yeah, so a lot of our conversation today is women heavy because traditionally women are the sole provider or the primary provider of their kids. So that's probably going to be a little bit of the focus. So no disrespect for men there. I know there are a lot of you out there at home who are the primary carers, and I think that is absolutely wonderful. But women are normally the ones to take a step back in their career. So whether it's, working part-time, taking a job that's less stressful, taking a job that's school hours friendly, because I'm not quite at school hours yet, but I can already see how challenging 8:30 till 2:30 is going to be on trying to have a job and do all those things, which obviously comes with a pay cut. So, and I think a lot of people who are very career driven in their earlier careers can really also struggle with this on an emotional level, because they've worked really hard to get to where they were and maybe done uni or, climbed the corporate ladder. And then all of a sudden you've got a baby in your arms and you're questioning everything that you've just done for the last 10 or 15 years. Unpaid work. This is out of the Status of Women report card that gets published annually around International Women's Day by the Australian government.
We can link that in the show notes as well.
It's really interesting, actually. It's not a lot of it is necessarily child-based, but a lot of it is woman-based and our place in the world at the moment financially. So women, unpaid work is probably one of the underlying unexpected costs that people don't realise. So when a woman is partnered and has a child under 15, she's on average doing 47 hours a week of unpaid work.
What gets bucketed into that? Like,
I guess everything
dishes,
other
cooking,
than not being at work.
Driving kids around. What? Yeah.
Household duties.
Stereotypical kind of trad wife stuff. Like,
pretty much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on here, but the single ladies, so single mums, are doing 40 hours a week.
Wait. So if I kick Alex out of the house, I'm going to be doing, in theory, less.
You get 7 hours back in your week.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting.
So obviously
I'm just going to shout
out.
Look out.
Yes, I'm just going to shout out to all the husbands like my husband who certainly don't add 7 hours worth of housework to the books. But, it's just really interesting to see that, partnered women are doing more housework than unpartnered mums.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And we should all be striving to have a partner in our lives that makes our lives a little easier.
Yeah.
Doesn't add to the chores. In fact, they should be modern day men who know how to cook, clean, help. And, yeah.
But I mean, it's 47 hours. That's more than a full-time job.
I know.
No wonder we're all burnt out.
Yeah.
My hair's falling out. All right, where are we up to? Ongoing care. So a lot of aftercare. So there are obviously minor complications in birth that can lead to long-term, damage, pelvic floor stuff. If you're having a cesarean, then obviously there are some things there that might need ongoing care. So whether that's physio, chiro, psychological support, nutritional, a naturopath, things that are going to support women replenish what they lost during pregnancy, because that's quite a heavy burden on the women's body.
Which we are full advocates of here at Reset.
Yes.
Like, you can't fill from an empty cup. And we've had plenty of guests on here talking about the importance of seeking help and proactively as well before it gets to that breaking point. Yeah. So those costs should almost be non-negotiable. Like, if you're going to have a baby, then it needs to be factored in that you need that love and care and support in postpartum. Yeah.
Because it depletes us. And especially if you breastfeed and if you do that for a lengthy period of time, it just continues to deplete our bodies. So obviously I'm not a specialist in that area, but all of your other lovely guests that are, I'm sure have covered that. But they're costs that obviously we need to consider. And it's not cheap. Like, let's be real. It is quite expensive by the time you go through the appointments, and then any supplements and eating better food is expensive too. And then some other things that we know about women in general, but definitely affect women who've had kids and time out of the workforce, is that we still have a 21% super gap. So we're getting to retirement, we've got 20% less than, and this is comparing to males. And we still today have a pay gap of nearly 12%. So they're just some things that, it's a struggle in some areas, but they're just things, I guess, to be mindful of, especially I remember saying to my boss before I had my first, I'm going to do 4 days. I'm going to come in 4 days a week, but I'm going to do my hours of 5 days. Is that okay? Do a compressed week. And he said, look, Jade, I will let you. I'm more than happy to support you however you need, but I don't want to make this decision with you until you've had your baby and you come back. I was like, no worries. In my first week, he asked me if I wanted to do that, and I said, no way. I will just do my 4 days and get out of here and get home, because I think your mindset just changes around where you want to be at that time. Like, I was leaving my 10-month-old baby in childcare 4 days a week, so of course I just wanted to go home. I didn't want to be at work and then miss him going to bed and not see him and all those sort of things that happen when you start to work bigger hours.
Yeah, it's so tricky because I love that that was a conscious decision for you.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people listening that are going to have a child and are going to think that actually it is better for me and our family if I do go back to work full time.
Yeah.
But I know that that's not always easy for people for a host of different
Oh, yeah.
reasons. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's, it just brings a different sort of feel to life, I guess, having another little person dependent on you that you do want to spend all your time with.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that you're excited to talk about this part.
Yeah.
The Australian government has a number of different support policies in place, and they change all the time depending on who's in power and what month or year it is. But what kind of options are available at the moment to women and parents?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia today, I think we're probably in quite a lucky position that the government support is probably as good as it's ever been, and it's only getting better. So some of the, I guess, more common things that most people might know about are the government paid parental leave scheme. So from July 1, 2024, this is now 22 weeks of paid leave, and the government will also pay 12% superannuation on top of this for the first time ever.
That's a big win.
Yes, I think is amazing.
Hey, Rose, good timing.
Yes. Yes. That's from 1 July, so you're good. You're in there. So the actual rate of that parental leave, it's $183 a day, which basically is $915 a week over a 5-day working week. But you don't necessarily need to take it 5 days at a time. But I'll come to that in a minute. At the moment, you can share up to 10 days with your partner and increasing to 20 days by 2026. So this is really helpful, obviously, for, partners who want to have some time at home with their child. What I also found interesting was that in 2016, 2017, we had about 5% of men taking paid leave or taking primary carers leave in Australia. Obviously, it's always been a little bit taboo with a male taking time from their business. I've heard a lot of clients say they had the option to do it but chose not to for various reasons, which were mostly pressured reasons.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Guys, man up.
Yeah.
Literally be better.
Yeah. But positive news, this is now sitting at 17% of men in Australia.
Amazing.
Taking time to raise their kids. And this is talking like, in the first kind of year of their life and being the primary carer, so being home by themselves with their child and their partner returning to work.
Hopefully that stat continues to grow because children, if they are lucky enough to have two parents, they want to spend time with both.
Absolutely.
They benefit from spending time with both.
And I think that the splitting the leave between partners is a really big player in that, because if you think about male-dominated industries, and we're talking about a female-male relationship here, that quite often there's no such thing as parental leave. There's no, if you're a tradie, those sort of things, it's just not even spoken about. So it's really good that everyone has this option, as a partner, whether you're female or male, as a second, partner, not the primary carer, you can take this opportunity. You can also, with the government paid parental leave, split your payments. So after you return to work, which I think is awesome because a lot of people might initially want to start back at work part-time and build back up to full-time, and this just helps close that financial gap between maybe having another month or two working part-time, getting baby settled into daycare, and then still having a good level of income coming in. Now, to qualify, we must individually earn less than about $175,000. If you do earn more than $175,000, they will then look at your family combined income, which sits at about $364,000 before you wouldn't be eligible to receive that. So for most Aussies, they're going to be eligible for that. There is also obviously family tax benefits, which are usually for middle to lower income brackets, but offer some really good support from a tax perspective. Parenting payment, which we typically see more for our single parents, and obviously then the childcare subsidy, which caps out once you have a family combined income of around $530,000, which is actually quite a generous figure, I think, because 2 years ago it was about $300,000 and maybe $350,000 family income. So a lot more support for Australians now.
Is there a nice summarised list somewhere of all of these that we can link in the show notes?
Yeah, it's probably, I would say, on the Social Security website, so Centrelink, Australian Service, whatever, Services Australia they call themselves, yeah. there should be, you can actually go in there and type in your scenario and it will come up with all of the payments that you may be eligible for.
Okay.
Bit of a calculator. We'll link that one because that's good.
Yeah, nice. That sounds very practical and helpful.
So we've got paid parental leave, family tax benefits, parenting payments, childcare subsidy, and a whole host of other things depending on, mostly based on your income. So there's always obviously a little bit of conversation in Australia that, you know, families are getting these benefits when maybe people that choose not to have children obviously may not be entitled to any of this. But I think it was just worth sharing why it's actually in the government's financial interest to ensure that we continue to have children in our country. So the Australian National University did a report in March 22 for the Australian Government Centre for Population, which stated that the total fertility rate for women is 1.5. So that means we're having 1.5 children in our family. So most people having between 1 to 2 children. In the 1960s, this was actually 3.5 children.
Oh, wow. That's
per woman.
That's a big change when you hear it over not that long of history.
It's a huge change. We need 2.1 children per household to sustain our population.
Ooh. Okay, no pressure.
Yeah. Yes. So this is without relying on migration. This is why we have migration, to ensure that our population can continue to be sustainable. Because if we have a decline in population, we just run into a whole host of other economical issues down the track that may not be present now, but that will certainly be present later down the track. And it actually noted the contributing factors to this decline relating mostly to finances, women having children later in life, which is just probably more the modern day woman who wants to go to uni and start a career and travel and maybe buy a house and do all that first, with good reason, because kids are expensive.
Yeah.
So it all sort of is, you know, we need the government to help support Australians in having more children to sustain our population without then having to rely further on migration.
Yeah, interesting to hear that sort of political and economic rationale as to why they're heavily investing in supporting families.
Yeah, and I feel like they're only moving in the right direction. Like we've only ever had improvements. Even when I had my first child, we got the childcare subsidy, but there was no second child higher subsidy. So once you've had more than one child, your subsequent children, while ever you have a child under the age of 6, will receive, I think it's about a 20% increase or something like that to how much of a subsidy they can get. So it makes it significantly cheaper for your subsequent children to go to childcare. But without that, it's really, it made a huge difference. You know, we just happened to time it that we had children around then, that we had our 2 before that came in. But I went and did the maths recently and I was like, oh, wow, like we actually would have been out of pocket quite a lot more than we are. So they are making it more, if you can get your child into daycare to start with, but they are making it more affordable, thankfully, for us to be able to go and work and have our children in care.
Yeah, okay. If someone's listening and they're on the fence trying to consciously choose, do I or don't I have kids? And if I do have kids, now that I have all these big numbers swirling around my head of just how much they're going to cost, as a financial advisor, how do you recommend people plan for that?
Yeah, it's really overwhelming, obviously. Like this is a lifetime of costs on one page, you know, so it doesn't happen like that. But some of the biggest things that we can be is starting just to take control of your financial health now. So just making sure we have a budget, know what we're doing in terms of what we're spending our money on, freeing up any cash flow that we can, and reducing debt as much as possible so that we're not you're putting ourselves in a position that's stressful when we're not maybe having as much income as we might normally when we're on leave. Or maybe having to return to work sooner than we would have hoped to otherwise. And strictly speaking, kids actually reduce our borrowing capacity as well. So if we're planning to have children and we do want to buy a home, we sort of need to think about what we want to do first, I guess, potentially depending on how many kids you might already have or you want to plan to have in the future. Every child that you have will actually reduce the amount of money you can borrow to buy.
By how much do we know roughly?
I'm actually not licensed probably.
Oh, okay. Google it.
But that's fine. Mortgage brokers, there are mortgage brokers out there. Look, I have been quoted by a mortgage broker that it's about $70,000 per child that you have. So not an insignificant amount.
Yeah. So
yeah.
each child you have, you can borrow approximately $70,000 less.
Yeah,
the
no,
bank will.
that's the number that I was given last year, and it will depend on interest rates, income and all that sort of thing, and other factors in your life, but as a rule of thumb.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So note to self, get the mortgage first before declaring that you have kids. Okay.
If you can.
One
it's
of the
hard,
many
though.
things to think through. Yeah.
Talk to your workplace, understand any paid parental leave schemes you may be eligible for, research government support available just to help you plan a bit of a budget for when you have your kids. And many women return to work, women in particular return to work part-time. So do have a think about if this is something that you would like to do after you have kids, and by how much it might impact the family budget, and whether you feel you can afford to do that, or whether you may need to change jobs to make that happen, or whatever that might look like.
Yeah. Or if you do want to go back full time, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to this love their careers and don't want to give that up. So I guess it's just factoring in, okay, if I'm going back to work full time, is my partner going part time, or do I need additional daycare fund or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's obviously going to cost a little bit more working full time. And there's a little bit of a debate as well around working 4 and 5 days because of the childcare subsidy, and actually working out whether you're financially worse off going back to work 5 days a week. So that's a really interesting calculation as well. It's obviously dependent on everyone, but I've had a couple of people that we did some calculations for that they were better off by $50 for the week for doing 5 days versus 4 days, and for them they felt that $50 wasn't worth that, and they then chose to do 4 days instead of 5. And I mean, everyone's different with what they want and what's important to them, but it's just interesting.
It is so interesting. And I know that having a lot of friends who have loved and thrived in their careers and then wanted to go back to that after having kids, they actually found it really difficult to find jobs that were meeting their skill level and that would light them up and inspire them, that were anything less than 5 days a week. And so I think sometimes it's important for us to remember that it's not just financial, and that there's like our own needs and fulfillment and our own mental health that does need to come into play as well when making those decisions.
That's right. And some other industries that just, like, if you're FIFO and all those sort of things that just don't allow for this. So, healthcare industry, any shift work sort of thing, it's a bit of a curveball, and personally I don't have experience in those areas. So speaking from a corporate world, we've got a little bit more flexibility, and probably been quite grateful for the types of roles I've had that have been very family friendly.
Yeah. This next question I have on my mind might be one that is almost best directed at a psychologist. But what's your advice on couples that are thinking about having kids to kind of navigate these conversations around finances and splitting the responsibilities of parenting and careers and things before deciding if they have kids or not? How do you have those conversations in advance? Because I think even though we have progressed so much as a society, there's still this kind of stigma around, oh, well, the male will go back to work full time, the female will sacrifice her career. I don't necessarily agree that that's how it should be done, but I think these are important discussions to have with your partner in advance of just, well, what is this new version of our relationship going to look like once baby arrives? From a financial perspective, I'm sure you've worked with plenty of couples navigating this. Like, what's your recommendation there?
Yeah. So my first point here I said is your current relationship will probably give you a good insight into what life is like with kids. So if you're already fighting about finances, you're already stressed about finances, a child is going to make that worse. The same with the household workload. If you already feel like it's not fair, or, it's really hard on you, or one person's not pulling their weight, it's only going to get worse when we introduce a child. So we do need to have those conversations. And like you said, I'm sure your lovely psychologists who you've had on the show would have some great tips on how to navigate those conversations. But I read something recently about 2 people in a household can't have 2 big jobs at one time. And what they went on to elaborate was it wasn't 2 financially high-paying jobs. It was 2 jobs that might take a lot from you as a person. That there's 2 of you in a household and you're drained, and, your work is taking a lot from you. So it sort of said this, it was in a book and I just cannot recall the name of it. I'm sorry, it was like in passing. But it was basically saying we kind of always need someone there who is going to be the designated sick day person, who's going to be the designated, I can go and pick up the kids when they're sick. I can do appointments, like some children need to have speech therapy or OT therapy, and who's going to navigate that? Because business hours are usually 8 to 5 and trying to fit that into a job, that's really challenging. So having conversations about who is going to be, I guess, the available parent, and sometimes that might mean changing jobs, especially if it's not something that you can just drop and run away from. And having those conversations early, I feel, can sort of set the expectation and avoid any conflicts later down the track with that. And money conversations before you have kids. So because you're setting up a family, you want to treat your finances like a family unit. It's not yours and theirs anymore in terms of money, it's ours. And absolutely, if you each want to have your own accounts to do the things you want to do, go for it. But generally speaking, we don't want to have one partner paying the other partner an allowance or things that might make it feel unbalanced from a financial perspective. So taking care of things as a family unit is usually a little bit more ideal than having, my pay will pay for this and your pay will pay for that, when it becomes especially different if there's one of you that has to take a pay cut in line with part-time work, maternity leave, paternity leave, whatever it might be that they're taking.
Yeah, and I feel like these things are maybe easier when you are in a two-parent relationship that is still together.
Yeah.
But the stats unfortunately on divorce are 50%, approximately 50%. So it gets a lot messier if that happens.
Yeah, so I think obviously having these conversations well before children arrive can just help. I mean, even the smallest things, like when we had our first Christmas after we had our eldest boy, my husband and I were getting kind of presents ready, and his childhood grew up with big presents from Santa and just one from mum and dad, and mine was the other way around. And we were both standing in the lounge room going, well, where do we put these presents? Because you've had it this way and we've had it that way. Like, there's just so many things that pop up as a parent that you just have to learn to navigate in the moment and just figure out. But money is probably not one of those that you want to be leaving until
on the
last minute.
Yeah. Okay. My list of things that Future Me has to deal with is growing. Assuming that one parent, and stereotypically, like we said, is the female, has to take a bit of a step sideways or backwards in their career in the early days of parenting. What are some ways that we can kind of equalize the financial burden, I suppose we'll call it?
Yeah.
Like, I guess, can partners be paying into super, or like, what are some things we should be thinking about?
Yeah, so much like I said just a minute ago with treating family income as a whole, not just as yours and theirs, but we can do super splitting when we're talking about super, so that if you don't have any extra money to put into super, that's okay. You can actually split up to 85% of your partner's superannuation into your own super. And there's good reasons for why we want to keep an equal, as much as we can, super balance as we go through life and into retirement. There's certain caps and thresholds where extra taxes are applied. So if we can equalise it as much as possible, it gives us the most amount of time before these extra taxes would likely apply.
How do we make that happen?
You'll need to just talk to your super fund. So they'll have a special form that you'll be able to do that with. The same with a spouse contribution. So if you do have some extra money, maybe your partner is quite a high income earner, they can make a contribution to your super fund on your behalf and claim a tax deduction. So in Australia, we're always looking for a tax break. So that's just one of those that can help. But yeah, the biggest way is treating your earned income as family income. Just because there's one person being at home and not being paid doesn't mean that it's unworthy or worthless work. It's just not paid. So yeah, one person's keeping up their end at home and the other is in paid employment, and it's shared money.
And if I think about, again, just plenty of examples within my friendship group, I know that I've spoken to some of the dads and they are the ones back at work full time, and that's easier for them than being home caring. And I relate to that. I feel like work is a fun, creative, inspiring place for me, and being at home all day might not feel as inspiring. And so even if you're not getting paid for what you're doing, it's still work.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very important. And I'm the same. Like going back to work, I found that far more challenging for my mind than being at home. Found that physically challenging because like sleep deprivation and quite mind-numbing tasks for me doing household duties. So I really looked forward to going back to work to use my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also liked making some money too.
Of course, don't we all? Yeah. Okay, so when I was researching for this show, I was looking at the stats of divorce and single parent households, and I made some notes here that there's over 1 million single parent households in Australia, and 79% of those are run by women. If anyone's listening that is considering divorce or is already divorced, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I guess more so for people that are already in a position where they're a single parent would be having a clear budget. Know what's coming in, know what's going out, know where you're at all the time. It's really important, I guess, really for anyone to have a good budget. But I do notice that my single parent clients need to take a lot more notice of this. If you can and you have the capacity to do so, create some additional income, whether it's a side hustle or whatever it might be. You just try and get a little bit more income in if you're in a position where you need to do that. But again, only if you have the capacity to do so, because it's a lot to be looking after a child, especially if you actually don't have any family support outside and you're, reliant really on yourself and your village is quite small. Find out about any additional financial support that you might be eligible for. So like I said, go through the Government Services Australia website. There'll be like a calculator that you put in your financial information into in your situation, and it will spit out the amount of different subsidies or support that you may be eligible for. And probably the most important one is to create a support network, and whether that's people in your situation or just close family and friends, it's really important to have people like that around you as a sounding board. And I would also consider them to get a financial advisor. And the reason why I say this is our family and friends mean well, but sometimes there's a lot of misinformation spread. And we can do a lot of damage with a little bit of information, but not knowing the full picture. So I do have a number of single ladies from 25 to 85 that I work with. And I especially notice the older ladies are really vulnerable when it comes to finances, and obviously then elder abuse and whatnot, which is a whole different kettle of fish. But yeah, if you have a good support network around you, and especially someone that you can talk about your finances with, I think it takes a lot of burden away from that whole financial side of things.
Yeah. Just building on that, I'm guessing that the increase of financial abuse within relationships really starts to rear its head when you go from maybe a dual income household to a single income household. What counts as financial abuse in Australia, and what are some of the kind of warning signs that we should look out for?
Yeah. So I'm just gonna read these because I don't want to get them wrong. But the Attorney General's Department, so the government, defines financial abuse as abuse that involves someone controlling your ability to get, use or keep money or economic resources. The Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2023 stated that 1 in 6 women reported experience financial abuse by a partner. So that's a lot. They went on to define financial abuse as monitoring your spending and not letting you choose how to spend your money, forcing you to buy things or sign contracts, making you lend or give people your money or belongings, creating debt in your name, which is a really big one, stopping you from accessing your bank accounts, making you give them your account details or not telling you information about your money, making it hard for you to get or keep a job, not making child support payments after a relationship has ended, making demands for further and or excessive dowry payments. Now, this is money or gifts that are given in some cultures at a wedding for their bride. So basically forcing the bride's family to give them more money, which was an interesting point that they put on here because obviously Australia is a multicultural nation and something I've never heard of before. So I found that quite interesting that they've pointed that out as well. Very varied. It can be very minor and very unnoticeable and innocent, and there might be nothing in it. And like we were talking before, there might just be one person that does all the finance stuff, and that's well and great. But I guess if the relationship turns sour, then it can become problematic.
Yeah, 1 in 6 is a scary start.
It's a big start.
Yeah. What can we do if we think that we are in that situation, or maybe one of our friends? Like 1 in 6, chances are there is someone in our world that's going through this. Are there any helplines or anything we can call?
Yeah, there's a number. So there's a number of them. So we've got the National Debt Line, which I think is particularly helpful for when we've had debt put in our name that we were not aware of. We've got 1-800-RESPECT, Good Shepherd, and for older Australians, the Older Persons Advocacy Network. So if we're worried potentially about our parents or our grandparents, we can seek some support there. These are just a small amount of them. There are a lot of them. If we just Google financial abuse help or hotlines, there are a number of websites available, and you can chat to people over the computer if you wish, rather than having to call them as well.
Okay, great. We'll put links to all of those in the show notes because I think that's important.
It is, yeah.
Jade, what haven't we spoken about today that you wish more people knew?
Yeah, so there's a lot of big, scary numbers in everything that we spoke about today. Having children is obviously a huge financial decision, but obviously it can't be too bad, because the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report states that parents in Australia reported a higher than average life satisfaction, rating their satisfaction with life in Australia 8.2 stars out of 10, which is higher than the general national average. So I think there's something to say there that, parents in Australia are generally pretty happy. We have a pretty good lifestyle here, and we have good support networks available to us if we need it.
That is a nice stat to end on, because we've discussed a lot of numbers today, and some of them feel heavy and overwhelming, but yeah, okay. And then on a personal note, you're a mum.
Yeah.
2 kids.
Yep.
What season of life are you in at the moment?
Yeah, it's a big season of lots of change, I think. So for me personally, I was sort of doing a little bit of reflecting as I was doing my notes on the things that we've changed in our life since becoming a parent. And I've gone from being employed to being self-employed to now I'm actually going back to being employed, which I think is a really important thing to share, because I feel like we can sometimes feel like we're stuck in a situation that we're not enjoying anymore, but there is always something else out there for us. So I started my business in January 2024, sort of 18 months in, I suppose, now. And it's gotten to the point where most of my reasons for starting it have turned into reasons why I've realised it's probably not the right season of life for me to be doing this in, which revolve around my kids.
Interesting. Can you share some of these reasons?
Yeah.
I think it's really insightful for people.
Absolutely. So
and me. I'm curious. Tell me.
Yeah. So I guess we set our lives up to have kids in a way that I wouldn't have to work full time, because I really just wanted to have one day a week that I could play mum, I guess. And so my kids have always gone to daycare between 3 and 4 days a week. They've just started this year 5 days a week, simply because I very gratefully have gotten so busy in my business, which is fine. That's fine. But the days are becoming longer and longer. They're being there bigger and bigger days. Everybody's really tired in my house. And it just kind of felt like it was just really, really hard work. My husband is also self-employed, so we've got about 8 to 10 staff in his business. I do a lot of work with him in terms of like the mental load of his bookwork and all of that sort of stuff. So it just kind of got to a point where I went, hey, this is actually, the flexibility that I can do what I want in the day, like no boss, this is so good. But I'd be up till midnight making up for it that night. So it kind of was just like, you know what? I need to be able to leave my office and close my door and not think about it until tomorrow and be really present for my kids, because I found I'd be sitting on the ground playing Duplo with them and my phone would buzz with an email and I would duck off to my office to take 10 minutes to do that, which would then turn into, I forgot to do that one last thing. And 20 minutes later, I was like, oh no, like I've just stolen 20 minutes off the kids, because, I've taken an opportunity to do that. So I realised it was just taking away a lot of who I intended to be as a mum, which is fine. We change as we go through life with what we want. And yeah, so Luckily for me, I have a beautiful friend, Deline, who has a business called Mazzy Wealth, who I speak to all the time. She's a good confidant of mine. And she said, don't worry, why don't you just come and work for me? And I thought, you know what, that's actually a really good idea. So by the time this show goes live, I will have been working with Deline and Mazzy Wealth for a number of months. But I'm really looking forward to having a bit more time with my kids. So I'm returning to part-time work, which, again, is a lot of what we spoke about today and taking that, I guess, step back. And it's a big decision closing a business. You know, it took 12 months to get going and I really felt like I'd finally hit my stride. And now I'm saying, oh, hold on a minute, it's not really what I wanted. So, and that's okay. I'm a better person for having done that experience the last 18 months. I'm a better employee, I think, than I would have been otherwise.
I think that's really important to share because I think it's easy when you're in a corporate 9-to-5 job to think the grass is greener in the world of entrepreneurship, which anyone that's ever dived into that knows that you quit a 5-day job to then start running a 7-day job where you're always on. Yeah. And that can be perfect for people in certain seasons of their life, but clearly not for you right now. And I think it's so beautiful to give ourselves permission to grow and change depending on where we're at. And this might not be you forever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is for right now.
It is. So, and like my kids were 1 and 3 when I started my business. And I look back and I think, wow, that was so young. And they're now 5 and 3. And yeah, I just want to grab some more time with them before they head off to school because they're boys and they'll probably want to just hang out with dad and fish when they're teenagers or play footy or not know us. So
hey,
that can be
mums
my time.
can fish and play footy too.
I do. Yeah. I must say country girls who grew up doing all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so now's the time. I'm gonna do this for a while and see where it takes me.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, Jayde, thank you so much for joining me again today and for
so
diving deep into the numbers for all of us. Thank you for doing the research on behalf of everyone that's listening, including myself. It's been so nice to have you back in the studio.
Thank you. I always love chatting to you, Ash.
Aw, I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, sounds good.